Okay, welcome back. My name is Roy Osherove. We're going to talk about where do you start with continuous delivery. Now, one common problem that a lot of teams have is that the build is unruly, very hard to maintain, or even get started with. So, I'm going to introduce a pattern which I call the shipping skeleton. Now, the shipping skeleton is a pattern that's built on a different pattern. And that different pattern is called a walking skeleton. Now, the walking skeleton was created by Alistair Coburn, and it's a pretty old pattern. Basically, what it says is that this is a walking skeleton is a tiny implementation of the system that performs small end-to-end function, and then it talks a little bit the fact that it doesn't have to have the full architecture, but you can connect the main architectural components and then evolve. So I took the same idea and I kind of said, what if we had a walking skeleton for the delivery pipeline? And I call that a shipping skeleton. So a shipping skeleton is a combination of two elements. You have the skeleton of the application, but this time I'm not talking about architecture at all. It's just a tiny implementation of the system. As far as we're concerned, it could just say hello world. It does nothing but show hello world to the user. And then you have a shipping system for the skeleton. And the shipping system is automated and comes as close as possible to the production servers or where the customer can see it and use it. And it should require no human contact as much as possible. So you shouldn't need to merge things to be able to use the shipping system, for example. So once you have the shipping system and the skeleton in place, they should you should be able to evolve both in parallel. So they can be very, very simplistic things. But once you get things going into that template, you can just start evolving things as time goes by. And to me, it solves a lot of the maintainability problems that we have with the build systems. And I kind of think of it like a hotel room. If you stayed in a hotel for 2 weeks, it would be really bad if they had cleaned your room just once a week, right? After a week, your room would just look horrible. At least my room would just look horrible. But because they clean your room every day, it's just a little messy. So it's very, very easy to clean. So it's a very incremental way of evolving and growing the build system as well as the code. So as the code needs new things, the build system gets new features. So by default, it might not need all the complicated stuff, but when the complicated stuff is needed, you add it as time goes by. So it's kind of like one of those, I don't know if they're called Ginzu trees or whatever that is, where you trim very little trees and the whole point is to grow very, very beautifully into specific shapes. That's that. So here's an example. You can just have a shipping skeleton code, which would just say console write line hello world, and then you would then take that and run it through an automated build system, continuous delivery system that compiles it, tests it, and deploys it. And it could deploy it to test servers, production servers, staging servers, hopefully all of the above. Now, important tactic. If the best way and the best time to use a shipping skeleton is at the beginning of your project. So my best advice to you is to start a project by shipping it. Okay? The first few weeks, you end up with a shipping skeleton where you can actually show a demo that says hello world on the production server, and then maybe after that all it takes is just reversing a DNS entry so that production server becomes live. But you ship to production and you start by shipping, and then every little change you make goes all the way into production. And this is very, very nice because you start getting feedback and you no longer live in a bubble, as we talked about in previous videos when we talked about feedback from the customer. Now, in terms of hardware, you might just need a build machine. I personally like to use TeamCity and agent machines. And agents are the things that actually listen to the continuous delivery or continuous integration server like TeamCity and execute the scripts that it tells them to run. So you would need a build machine or something that runs the CI server, something that is a test machine, a staging machine, and a production machine. And of course, this can all be in the cloud. And I've used Amazon EC2, and it's very, very usable. I've heard also good things about Azure, but I've personally never used it, so I don't have a good opinion or a bad opinion of it. Once I do, I'm happy to add any recommendations. Um, Now it's important to also understand that staging looks exactly like production, so that the same problems that you have to deploy to production, you should have the same problems to deploy to staging. So staging is actually used to test your deployment scripts. In terms of build configurations are the steps or the stages that your code goes through as it goes closer and closer to the customer. So you might have a CI, continuous integration build, and that is the quick feedback that just runs the unit test. And then you might have a slow build. Some people call it nightly build, but I like to run slow builds even during the day. You might have a build or can build configuration that deploys to test servers, to staging servers, and production. And you'll notice that the last three are all about deploying, but the thing that changes is the environment. So all these things are part of the CI server as configurations, and they run scripts which get parameters from the CI system. And they basically just say, okay, now you deploy to this and you deploy to that. But that's the basic build system that I would have. Maybe I wouldn't even have staging. Maybe I just deploy to test and then directly to production until such point where I can no longer just deploy to production because people are using it. And then I would have staging servers. Here's an example from TeamCity where I have the most basic, this is maybe after 3 weeks of having a web application and continuous delivery on that web application. And what you see is basically a single project, and under that project we have 4 build configurations, and the names also have numbers in them. I put the numbers as in the name titles so that we have sorting, so that they're sorted by flow and when something happens. And each one of them is happening one after the other. So we have CI, and that only runs like 13 tests right now. And then we automatically deploy to test, and you automatically deploy to staging and to production. And we can set things up so that each one gets triggered by the previous one finishing, so that when we check in and CI gets run, we end up with deployment to production maybe a few minutes later. And that's one of the nicest things, that continuous delivery can happen, and your code will actually end up in production if you want it to as quickly as possible. If you don't want it to, you can put it in a branch or in a feature flag, which we will talk about in a separate video. If you'd like more information about this and other things, just go to beautifulbuilds.com or just contact me on Twitter at Osherove. Thank you. Cheers.